Hello and welcome to another bearing removal and installation video featuring Boca bearings. Today's engine is a two-stroke Magnum XL 46 ABC engine that just so happens to need a set of bearings removed and installed. So before we get right to the table and do that, I just want to say that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and Boca is very committed to continuing development for research and support for this cause. With that said, let's go straight to the table and remove some bearings. Okay, so here on the table I've got what I believe is all I'm going to need to do this simple bearing removal and installation. Well, at least the removal portion. I've got the crankcase mostly disassembled for this Magnum XL 46 engine. Just need to get the crankshaft out and the bearings out. I've got a small wood block to help drive the crankshaft out, a light hammer, my wood dowel that I'll use to punch that front bearing out, and a flat nose punch if necessary to help get that rear bearing out of the case if it stays in there. I've got a small bench vise over here off to the side. I've got my heat gun and a protective glove to protect my hand. So let's get straight to heating this engine up, or the case up, and remove these bearings. So I'm heating both areas where the bearings are, the main case here and of course the top where the front bearing is. Heating the aluminum up helps it to expand and allows the removal of the bearings to go much easier. Let's see if that's enough. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just see if I can't get this crankshaft to come out. Crankshaft is out. Now the question is, did the bearing come with it? And the answer is no, the bearing did not come with it. So let's see if we can get this bearing out of here now. So I'm just going to insert this wood dowel in here and just tap this thing, and hopefully I've got it hot enough. Oh yeah, that bearing came right out. One tap. So now the trick is, doesn't look like I've got a lip in there to catch on this. So I'm probably going to try one of two things. I'm probably going to try just heating this case up extremely and then putting a bigger piece of wood in my vise and just tapping, see if I can get it to come out like that. And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to have to use some other tools. So let me pause the video here and see what I'm going to be able to do to get this out. Okay, as you can see here, I've got some different tools and I've altered my setup just a little bit. So I'm going to try two different things here and we'll see what happens. So when you have a crankcase bearing or rear bearing like this that did not come out with the crankshaft, and the inner diameter or the inner race doesn't give you a lip between the crankcase and the inner race, if they're both flush and you really can't get an edge on it going in with a punch, there are two things you can do here. You can really heat this case up and just tap it on a piece of wood or a nice solid but soft surface like this, or you can use Boca's miniature bearing removal toolkit. I'm going to try tapping it first and see if I can't get this bearing out, and then if we have to go to using this tool, I'll explain and just demonstrate how to do that. So I'm going to heat this case up, and I'm going to have to really heat this case up hot to do this. So I'm probably going to shut the video off because this could take about a minute or two to heat up properly. So let me just start heating. Let's see if I've got that warm enough. Oh, okay, there we go. So that bearing came out like that. Now that thing is really hot, so I don't want to put it on my mat. So I didn't need to employ or use the miniature bearing puller from Boca at this time, which is, it's a good thing. But the bearing is out, and now we can move on to cleaning up this crankcase and the bearing installation. Okay, so I've got my crankcase all cleaned up. It's all dried off. My crankcase or crankshaft is all cleaned up, and I've got all the other tools necessary to do this bearing installation. I've got my tried and true trusty piece of wood to drive that front bearing in with my light hammer, my really beat up socket extension to use as a drive. And I've also got my jar here, which I'm going to take the lid off of. This is what I dispense some of this Boca bearing lightning lube road power into, because this is what I like to use for my reassembly, or at least the installation of the bearings of reassembly lube. And I'll usually just kind of put one squirt in this jar, set that aside then, and then that's how I'll put that material on. And I've also got my set of bearings here. And this bearing kit number for this particular engine is ENK-006. This is your standard kit number. And before I open those up, let me go ahead and just get these items lubed and ready to accept these bearings. I just feel sometimes that using my finger, I can feel best where to put this stuff. And in fact, as long as I'm doing this, I'm going to be reassembling the engine. I'll go ahead and lubricate the inside of this cylinder too, so that sleeve goes in there nice and smooth. Okay, so let's open up these bearings here. So as always, the front bearing is usually always, not usually, I always, unless the bearing kit doesn't come like that, or there's a specific reason, I always remove a shield and have one side of the front bearing shielded and the other side open so that it can get maximum lubrication. Rear bearings, 99% of the time, I'm going to remove both shields on these. So as you can see, both of these bearings are type ZZ, which means steel shields. So I'm going to remove a shield on one side of this front bearing and on both sides of this. So what I'll do here is I'll get right above the race with a small screwdriver and just push in there and pull up and get that out. Now that one is ready to go. This will be the side facing outside the engine. This side will be the side facing into the engine. Now for this rear bearing, I'll just do the same thing. It's just really quick and simple. Now these are permanently sealed bearings is what they're called. So this is a destructive process when you remove these types of shields. You cannot put them back on as you could on other types of shielded or sealed bearings. So now both of these bearings are ready to go. The final step in this process is to heat this crankcase up and install the bearings. But as usual, I always like to get the rear bearing on the crankshaft first. And the rest of that will come in and go on there as I tap it into place. But the reason I do that is because I'll always install the front bearing first, and then the rear bearing will go in like this with the crankshaft, and it acts as a self-centering mechanism so that your bearing doesn't go in there cockeyed. This usually just snaps right into place, but on this one it's a little bit snug there. So let me get my glove on, heat this crankcase up. Heating the crankcase up allows for the aluminum to expand slightly, allowing a tight-fitting bearing to be inserted much easier. That should be plenty. Set my crankcase here, orient my bearing, set it on the front. Wow, look at that. That one just dropped right into place. So that's unusual. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen very often at all. So what that's also going to mean is I'm going to need to kind of hold that bearing in place here because it's probably going to want to push right out. Alright, so now that's not as hot as I thought I had it, but let's close this up a little bit and hold that in place, and now we'll just drive in our rear bearing. Let's see if that's fully seated. Yes, that bearing is fully seated. We have just successfully completed the installation of a new set of Boca bearings in this Magnum XL 46 ABC engine.